At the dinner table, he calls me a freeloader. Under the table, his hand is around my wrist, so tight it leaves marks. Everyone thinks we hate each other. Only I know that the second the bedroom door closes, he becomes a completely different person. The first thing Julian Vance ever said to me was, "So you're the charity case." We were in the marble foyer of a house that could have swallowed my mother's old apartment 40 times over. My dad had just married his mom 8 days earlier. I was 20, holding a duffel bag that contained everything I owned, and Julian was leaning against the banister, looking at me like I was something the cat had brought in and then reconsidered. "I'm Theo," I said. I didn't ask. His mother, my new stepmother, Vivian, swept in wearing enough diamonds to fund a small war, and her whole face rearranged into warmth. "Julian, darling, be nice. Theo's family now." "Of course, Mother," he smiled. It was a beautiful smile. It did not reach his eyes by so much as a millimeter. "Welcome home, little brother," he said. Little brother, the way other people say cockroach. I told myself I'd survive it. I'd survived worse. I'd been surviving worse my whole life. I did not yet know that 3 hours later, in the dark of the upstairs hallway, that same boy would grab my collar, push me against the wall, and murmur against my ear, in a voice with no cruelty left in it at all. "Don't unpack too neatly. I like knowing you could leave. It makes it better when you don't. Let me back up. My name is Theo Marsh." My mother raised me alone in a 2-room walk-up above a laundromat, and she died when I was 19 quietly, the way she did everything, apologizing to the nurses for the trouble. My father had left us when I was 4. I met him again exactly twice before he showed up at her funeral in a coat that cost more than her casket and said, "Let me make it right, son." Turns out, making it right meant he'd married into the Vance fortune and needed to look like a family man for the shareholders. I was set dressing. I understood that going in. The Vances owned half the marina, a shipping firm, and a name that opened doors. My father had the charm and the deals. Vivian had the money and the pedigree. Together they were a very glossy transaction. And they came as a package with Julian 23, gorgeous, sharp as a dropped knife, and heir to all of it. Everyone told me the same thing at the wedding, over and over, like a warning disguised as gossip. Julian doesn't like sharing. Yeah, I'd figure out exactly what that meant soon enough. Dinner, night 1. Long table, candles. My father at one end doing his warm baritone routine about blending our families. Vivian at the other, radiant and watchful. Julian across from me. "Theo's going to enroll at Ashford in the fall," my dad announced. "Business program. I'm very proud." "Business," Julian repeated, tasting the word. "Do they teach a class on landing softly? Because it seems like he's got a talent for it." "Julian, I'm complimenting him, Mother. Not everyone can fall into a fortune this gracefully." He looked at me. "Tell me, do you even know what a P&L statement is? Or did you just follow the money like a very lucky duckling?" The table laughed, uncomfortable. My father laughed too, because my father always laughed with the room. I set down my fork. "It's a profit and loss statement. It tells you whether something is worth what it costs to keep." Something flickered in Julian's eyes. "And?" he said softly. "Am I?" "Julian, honestly." Vivian sighed. But under the table, at that exact moment, his foot pressed against mine. Not a kick, a press. Deliberate, warm through 2 layers of sock. And when I didn't pull away, because I was too surprised to his ankle hooked around mine and stayed, above the tablecloth, he was tearing me apart for sport. Below it, he was holding on like I was the last solid thing in the room. I didn't understand it yet. But my whole body went hot and still, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a problem. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being poor and then suddenly not. You don't relax. You get more alert, because now there's something to lose, and everyone around you seems to be counting the days until you lose it. Vivian's family were vultures in Kashmir. There was Aunt Cordelia, who asked me at brunch which program I'd come out of, meaning foster care, and looked disappointed when I said none. There was Cousin Bram, who managed some slice of the shipping arm and clearly thought my existence diluted his inheritance by a fraction of a %. They smiled at me and sharpened things behind their backs. Julian was the worst of them in public, colder, crueler, more precise. "Don't sit there," he'd say when I took a chair. That was my father's. "Your father's dead," Bram pointed out once, unhelpfully. "Exactly," Julian said. "So show some respect." And he'd look at me like I was the one being disrespectful, just by breathing his family's air. By week 2, I had a reputation, cemented by Julian himself, the interloper, the one the Golden Sun couldn't stand. It was almost funny how completely the household believed it. They believed it because when the two of us were in a room together with witnesses, Julian performed loathing like it was the role he was born for. And the second we were alone, he performed something else entirely. It started for real on the 6th night. I couldn't sleep. New house, wrong quiet. I was used to traffic and the hum of the dryers downstairs, and the Vance estate was so silent it rang. So I went down to the kitchen for water, barefoot, in an old t-shirt. Julian was already there. He was sitting on the counter in the dark, one long leg swinging, a glass of something amber in his hand. Moonlight came through the window and turned him silver. Without the daytime armor of a tailored shirt, in just soft sleep pants and nothing else, he looked younger, less like a weapon. "Can't sleep? Charity case? Don't call me that when there's no one here to impress." He tilted his head, considered me. "You noticed that you only insult me for an audience?" "Yeah, I noticed." I got a glass, filled it. My hands were steady, which surprised me. "So what is this? You practicing being awful so it's convincing later?" He slid off the counter, set his glass down, and crossed the kitchen toward me slowly, the way you approach something you don't want to spook. "No," he said. "The being awful is real. I meant every word." He stopped close. Too close. "I just also can't stop thinking about you, and I find that deeply inconvenient, so my heart did something complicated." "That's insane," I said. "Yeah." His hand came up, brushed my jaw. His thumb pressed the corner of my mouth, and his voice dropped to something I felt in my spine. "You have no idea how insane. You walked into my house with a duffel bag, and now you're all I—" He stopped himself, stepped back like it touched a stove. "Go to bed, Theo," I went. But I stood at my window afterward for a long time, water untouched, jaw still burning where his thumb had been, and I understood that I was in serious trouble and that some traitorous part of me had already decided I didn't want to be saved from it. We should talk about why this was impossible. On paper, Julian and I were brothers, stepbrothers, no shared blood, not one drop, but the marriage that made us family was fresh and fragile and strategic. My father needed the Vance name. Vivian needed a devoted husband to present to a board full of people who thought a widow couldn't run things. The whole arrangement was a house of cards, and the cards were us, one big, respectable blended family, photogenic and drama-free. If it came out, that the two brothers everyone thought hated each other were actually whatever we were. It would detonate everything. The optics alone. Vivian's relatives were looking for a reason to declare the marriage a sham and claw back their money. A scandal between the stepsons would be a gift to them. Blood in the water. Julian knew this better than anyone. He'd been raised in this ecosystem. He understood exactly what it would cost. Which is why, I think, the public cruelty was so total. It wasn't just cover. It was penance. Every barb he threw at me across a dinner table was Julian paying, in advance, for what he did after the doors closed. He hurt me where they could see so he could be gentle where they couldn't. I know how that sounds. I'm not telling you it was healthy. I'm telling you what happened. The touching escalated by degrees so small I couldn't have pointed to the day it changed. His ankle around mine at dinner became his hand finding my knee under the table. His hand on my knee became his fingers laced through mine, gripping, while above the tablecloth he was calling me a parasite and Aunt Cordelia was laughing into her wine. I got good at it, keeping my face flat while my whole nervous system lit up. I'd insult him back. At least I earned my place. You were just born into yours, and the family would gasp at the tension, and under the table his thumb would stroke slow circles into my palm like a reward. Good, the touch said. Fight me. Make it convincing. Then come find me later. And later I always did. The upstairs library, mostly. It had a door that locked and thick enough walls. He'd be waiting in the dark, and the second I stepped in, he'd have his hands in my hair, my back against the shelves, his forehead pressed to mine, breathing hard like he'd run there. Say something cruel to me, he'd murmur. Why? Because I spent all dinner being cruel to you, and I need us to be even before his mouth would drag along my jaw, before I do anything nice. You're unwell, I'd tell him, meaning it as the cruelty he asked for, meaning it as something much softer. Deeply, he'd agree, and then he'd kiss me until I forgot my own name. The first time he told me the truth about himself, it wasn't in the dark. It was noon, blazing. The two of us alone on the marina dock because he'd made a great show at breakfast of ordering me to make yourself useful and help move the boat covers. Since you eat like you're worth something. Vivian had beamed at him for including me. I'd rolled my eyes for the audience, and then it was just us and the water and no one for 100 yards. He handed me a rope and didn't let go of it, so for a second we were both just holding the same rope, close. My father died when I was 14, he said, not looking at me. The real one, Vivian's first husband. Heart attack on the 9th green, very tidy, very convenient for everyone who'd been waiting for him to die. A muscle in his jaw. After that, it was just me and her and the vultures. And I learned that the only way to keep anything in this family is to make everyone believe you don't want it. The second they know what you love, they take it, to hurt you or to sell it. It's the same thing to them. I understood then, slowly, and then all at once. That's why, I said, in front of them. You, if they knew, he said, finally turning to me, and his eyes were terrible and honest. What you actually are to me. They'd use you to gut me. Cordelia would have you thrown out by the weekend and frame it as saving the family's reputation. So, he let go of the rope, stepped back into the sun and into his mask, all in one smooth motion, because a gardener had appeared at the top of the dock. Move the covers, freeloader, he called, loud and bored. Or are you too delicate? Eat glass, Vance. I called back. Behind the gardener's back, he smiled at me. A real one. It nearly knocked me off the dock. You'd think the hard part would be the hiding. It wasn't. I'd been hiding things my whole life. Grief, hunger, fear. Hiding a want was almost restful by comparison. The hard part was the reversal, the whiplash. The way I had to hold two versions of Julian in my head at once and not let them touch. Public Julian, who told my father at a dinner party, a real one, 30 people, business associates. Theo's not really one of us, if we're being honest. But Dad's kind to take him in, and smiled while my father laughed, and I stood there in a borrowed jacket feeling every eye in the room file me under lesser. Private Julian, who found me 20 minutes later hiding in the coat room because I needed 1 second where no one was looking at me like that, and who came in and shut the door and didn't say a single clever thing, who just pulled me into his chest and held the back of my head and said, "I hate that I have to do that. I hate it. You know that's not," and stopped, because Julian Vance did not know how to finish sentences that made him vulnerable. "I know," I said into his collarbone. "I'll make it up to you. You always say that." "I always mean it." His arms tightened. "When it's ours, when we don't have to, I'll spend the rest of my life making up every word. When it's ours, like there was an after. Like this wasn't just a thing happening in stolen dark corners of someone else's house. I let myself believe it. That was my mistake, and my only joy, all at once." Bram started sniffing around in the second month. He wasn't smart exactly, but he was the specific kind of stupid that's dangerous. The kind that's paranoid about his inheritance and has nothing better to do than watch other people. And what he noticed was this, that Julian, who supposedly couldn't stand me, always seemed to know where I was. "You track him," Bram said to Julian at Sunday lunch, half joking. "It's weird. You always look at the door right before Theo comes through it." The table went a little quiet. I watched Julian not panic. It was a masterclass. He didn't even blink. "Of course I watch the door," he said, bored. "I like to know when the temperature's about to drop." He looked at me with flawless contempt. "It's a survival instinct. You'd understand if you'd ever had anything worth protecting from a leech." "Leech? Perfect." Cordelia laughed. Bram lost interest, but under the table, Julian's hand found mine and gripped so hard it hurt, and I understood that the boredom was a performance, stretched thin over pure fear. He was terrified, not of being caught, being cruel, of being caught, being kind. That night in the library, he wouldn't let go of me for a full hour, just held on in the dark, his heart going too fast against my back. "Bram's an idiot," I whispered. "Idiots start fires all the time," Julian whispered back. "They just don't know they're holding matches." Here's a scene I think about a lot. It was raining. Everyone else was out, my father and Vivian, at some gala. The relatives dispersed to their own glass houses. Just Julian and me and a storm and the enormous quiet house. And for one night, we didn't have to pretend. We made grilled cheese in the $10,000 kitchen. Julian didn't know how to work the stove he'd never once cooked for himself, and I laughed at him, openly, no audience to perform for, and he threw a dish towel at my head and then caught my wrist and pulled me in and kissed me next to a burning pan until the smoke alarm went off. We ate on the kitchen floor with our backs against the cabinets. He told me about his real father, the good memories, the ones he never said out loud. I told him about my mother, the laundromat, the way she used to fold other people's clothes so perfectly, like tenderness was a service she could offer the whole world. "She sounds," Julian said carefully, like she was worth more than everyone in this family combined. I had to look away because my eyes stung. "She'd have hated you," I said. "You're exactly the kind of rich boy she warned me about." "She'd have been right." He bumped my shoulder with his. "Warn yourself about me too. It won't help, but warn yourself." I didn't. That was also a mistake. I was collecting them like they were free. The thing about living a double life is that eventually you start to want the single one. I'd catch myself at dinner wanting to just say it, wanting to take his hand above the table for once, wanting my father to know that his son wasn't miserable and alone in this cold house, that there was one person in it who looked at me like I was worth keeping. Julian saw it happen. He always saw me. "Don't," he said one night, reading it off my face in the dark. "Whatever you're thinking about doing out loud, don't." I wasn't. You get this look, like you're tired of the game. He cupped my face in both hands. I'm tired of it too. But we hold, Theo, just until I have enough leverage that they can't touch us. I'm building it. I swear to you, I'm building it. Building what? He hesitated. Then, quiet. A way out that doesn't cost you everything. Vivian's got the family convinced I'm the loyal son. Cordelia's convinced I'd never let a nobody near the estate. As long as they think that, they underestimate me. And underestimated is exactly what I need to be, right up until the moment it matters. I didn't fully understand him then. I would. God, I would. Vivian, it turned out, had been watching too, just more patiently than Bram. She was not stupid. She had survived one dead husband and married a second for strategy. She read rooms for a living. And what she read, slowly, over weeks, was that her son's contempt for me had a texture to it. Too consistent, too attentive. Real hatred is careless. Julian's was curated. She didn't confront us. That's not how she operated. Instead, she started to maneuver. First, she suggested, sweetly, over dinner, that perhaps I'd be more comfortable in the guest cottage across the grounds. More independence, darling. A young man wants his space, away from the main house, away from Julian. Julian, magnificently, made it worse for me on purpose. Finally, some distance from the freeloader. Thank God. While under the table his grip on my wrist said, No, she's separating us. She knows something. Hold on. Second, she started inviting an appalling number of eligible young women to dinner and seating them next to Julian, and eligible young men to dinner and seating them next to me, as if to test which way we'd each lean if she gave us an exit. Neither of us leaned. We were far too disciplined for that. But I saw the calculation behind her lovely eyes, and I knew the clock had started. She was going to move against one of us, and it was never going to be her own son. It was going to be me. She's going to have me thrown out, I told Julian in the cottage, which was, at least, private in a way the main house never was. You know that, right? She's building a case. Poor Theo. He just never fit in. We tried so hard. She'll make it look like kindness. I know. Julian was pacing. He paced when he was afraid, I'd learned. I know exactly what she's doing. So what do we do? He stopped, looked at me. And for the first time since I'd met him, Julian Vance looked unsure. There's a version of this, he said slowly, where I let her, where I don't fight it. You leave, you go to school somewhere far. I get you an apartment and money quietly, and I visit you, and we wait. Years, maybe. Until the marriage is old enough to be bulletproof, and I control enough of the firm that no one can touch either of us. And then I come back, I said. As what? Your dirty secret with a diploma? He flinched. Or, I went on, because I was angry now. Angry with the specific fury of someone who has never once in his life gotten to keep something good. You fight for me now, in the open, and we blow the whole thing up, and we lose the money, but we get to be... You don't understand what losing the money means, Julian snapped. You think it's just comfort. It's not. It's power, Theo. It's the only thing that makes people like Cordelia unable to hurt you. If we go public and lose, they don't just cut us off. They ruin us. They'll bury you so deep, you'll never... Then let them, I said. We stared at each other. You don't mean that, he whispered. I've been poor my whole life, I said. I know exactly how to survive with nothing. It's you who's never had to. So don't tell me what I can't live without. I already lived without it. The only thing I don't want to live without is I couldn't finish it either. Turns out I'd caught his disease. Julian crossed the room and kissed me like an apology and a promise and a surrender all at once, and neither of us said the word, but it was there in the room with us, enormous and undeniable. Cordelia made her move at the reading of a will. Not a real death, a formality. There was an old trust set up by Julian's late father that came up for review every few years, and it required the whole family to gather with the lawyers to reaffirm the distributions. Boring, ordinarily. A rubber stamp, Cordelia turned it into an ambush. She stood up before the lawyer had finished his opening pleasantries and said, in a voice trembling with counterfeit concern, "Before we proceed, I feel I must erase something, for the good of the family." Everyone turned. "This marriage," she said, gesturing vaguely at my father, "was sudden, and the addition to our household," a glance at me, dripping, "has been a source of considerable disruption. I've spoken to several members of the family, and we're concerned that Vivian may have been taken advantage of, that this union, and this young man's presence in particular, represents a threat to the estate that dear Reginald built." My father started to object. Cordelia rolled right over him. "I'm proposing," she said, "that we protect the trust. That any claim by Mr. Marsh," she said my name like a stain, "or his father to Vance family assets be formally barred. And that, given the tension he's caused, he be asked to leave the estate. Surely no one here would object to that." She looked around the table for allies. Bram nodded. 2 other cousins nodded. And she looked, last and most confident, at Julian. Julian, who everyone in that room knew despised me. Julian, her secret weapon. Julian, whose loathing for the freeloader was the most reliable fact in the household. "Julian, darling," she said, "you, of all people, understand what's at stake. You've never hidden how you feel about him. Tell them. Tell them he doesn't belong here." The whole room turned to my stepbrother, and I understood, in a cold rush, that this was the moment, that everything we'd built in the dark was about to meet the light, and it was Julian's to choose. He could save the money. All he had to do was agree with her. Say the cruel thing one more time, the way he'd said it 100 times, and I'd be gone by nightfall, and he'd keep his fortune and visit me in some apartment across the country, and we'd wait years, maybe forever. Or, Julian stood up. He buttoned his jacket, unhurried, the way he did everything when he wanted the room to wait for him. He looked at Cordelia. He looked at Bram. He looked, last, at me, and something in his face I'd only ever seen in the dark came all the way up into the daylight and stayed. "You're right, Aunt Cordelia," he said. "I've never hidden how I feel about Theo." Her smile bloomed, victorious. "I've hidden it, Julian said, extremely carefully, for months, because I knew exactly what you'd do with it. And you've just proven me right, so thank you for that. Genuinely, you've made this so much easier. The smile died. Julian walked around the table, past Bram, past my sputtering father, past Vivian, whose composure cracked for the first time since I'd known her. He stopped beside my chair, and he put his hand on my shoulder in front of everyone, in the light, with witnesses, and he did not let go. I don't hate Theo Marsh, he said to the whole room, in the clear, bored, aristocratic voice he usually saved for insulting me. I'm in love with him, have been almost since he walked in the door with everything he owned in one bag and looked me in the eye like he wasn't afraid of me. I've spent months pretending otherwise, so that people exactly like you couldn't do exactly what you're doing right now. Silence. The kind that has weight. So here's where we are, Julian went on. You want to bar his claim to the estate. Fine. He never wanted your money, and neither do I, particularly. But you also want to throw him out. And that, his hand tightened on my shoulder, and his voice dropped into something with a blade in it. That is not going to happen. Because if he leaves, I leave. And I take with me every share, every vote, and every scrap of leverage I've spent 5 years quietly accumulating while all of you underestimated me. Cordelia found her voice. It was shaking. You can't! The trust, Julian said pleasantly, was set up by my father, my real father. And it has a controlling provision that reverts primary voting authority to his direct heir at 25. He checked his watch, almost lazy, which I turned 3 weeks ago. I've been waiting for one of you to give me a reason to use it. Thank you, Aunt Cordelia. You've been so generous. He turned to the lawyer, who was staring at him with the expression of a man realizing he's on the winning side by accident. Mr. Ellery, please confirm for the room. The lawyer cleared his throat, shuffled papers with visible relish, and confirmed it. As of Julian's 25th birthday, controlling interest in the Vance Trust, and by extension, meaningful say over the firm, the marina, and the flow of family money had passed to him. Cordelia, Bram, and the nodding cousins held minority stakes at his pleasure. They had walked into this room to strip me of a claim I'd never made. They'd handed Julian the knife instead. Now, Julian said, and finally, in front of God and the vultures and my open-mouthed father, he pulled my chair back and drew me up to stand beside him. His fingers laced through mine above the table for the first time in our lives. Theo stays in the main house, in my wing specifically, so let's stop pretending anyone's confused about the sleeping arrangements. And anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to sell me their shares and remove themselves from a family they were only ever loyal to for the payout. He looked around the table. Nobody moved. No takers? Wonderful. Then this meeting is adjourned. The fallout, honestly, was quieter than you'd think. That's the thing about vultures. They only have courage in a pack, and Julian had just broken the pack over his knee. Cordelia left within the hour, spine rigid, promising lawyers. Her lawyers, it emerged over the following weeks, took one look at the trust provisions and advised her to make peace. Bram tried to apologize to Julian and got a look so cold it could have frozen the marina. The nodding cousins remembered, suddenly, that they'd always found me charming. My father took it worst and best. He pulled me aside that night, and for a moment I braced for the disappointment, the "how could you?" the optics, the shareholders. And instead, this man who'd abandoned me at 4 and bought his way back into my life at 19, looked at me with something I'd never seen on him before, which was shame. "Your mother," he said, "would have seen through all of this in about 10 seconds. The money, the people, all of it," he swallowed. "She'd have wanted you to have something real. I haven't given you anything real. Not once." He looked toward Julian, who was pretending not to watch us from across the room. "If that's real, is it real?" "It's real," I said. "Then keep it," my father said. "God knows I've kept all the wrong things. It wasn't a repair, but it was a start, and I had learned to survive on less than starts." Vivian was the last conversation, and the strangest. She found me in the cottage I had never had to move into, sitting on the bed I had never had to sleep in alone. She stood in the doorway in her diamonds and looked at me for a long moment. "I knew," she said, "for weeks. His hatred was too well tailored. My son doesn't hate anything that thoroughly unless he's protecting it. Are you going to make trouble?" She laughed, softly, without much humor. "No, I married your father for a board and a name, Theo. I'm not sentimental about much." She paused. "But I loved Julian's father, once, before this family made me into whatever I am now. And Julian has been alone since the day that man died on that golf course. Truly alone. Performing loyalty for people who'd sell him the moment he was inconvenient." Her eyes softened by a fraction. "You made him stop performing in a room full of witnesses. Do you have any idea how much that cost him? How much he must—" She didn't finish it either. Apparently it was contagious across the whole family. "I'll fold it into the story," she said, gathering herself businesslike again. "The board will hear that my stepsons have reconciled beautifully. That's better optics than tension, honestly. A united front." She turned to go. Paused. "Don't let him lie to you the way he lies to everyone else. He's very good at it, but he can't do it to your face. I watched him fail at it for 2 months. Hold him to that." "I will," I said. She left, and I understood that in her cold, strategic way, that had been a blessing. Here's the last scene, the one that undoes all the others. That night, Julian came to the cottage, my cottage. Though I'd be moved into the main house by the weekend, and he didn't knock, because he never knocked, and he found me at the window watching the rain start up again over the marina. He didn't say anything cruel. He didn't have to anymore. That was the whole point. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around me and put his chin on my shoulder, and we watched the rain hit the water, and for a long time neither of us spoke because we didn't have to hide it in words anymore. "I've spent 5 years," he said finally, "planning how to be safe, accumulating leverage, making sure no one could ever take anything from me again." His arms tightened. "And then you walked in with a duffel bag, and I threw the whole plan away in a room full of people who wanted to destroy us, because I looked at your face and I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand pretending. Not for one more second." I turned around in his arms. "Say something cruel to me," I told him. "Old habit, old ritual." Julian Vance looked at me, the boy he'd pretended to hate at every dinner, in every hallway, in front of every witness, and for the first time in our entire lives, in the light, with the door unlocked and nothing left to hide, he refused. "No," he said. "I'm done being even. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being nice to you, and everyone's just going to have to deal with it." Then he kissed me, slow and certain, with no audience, no performance, no debt to pay. Outside, the rain kept falling on the marina his family had to spend a fortune to own. Inside, for once I had everything I wanted, and no one could take it, and I finally let myself unpack neatly